Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Christy, and we work with Globe International.
Working with missionaries, we hear stories of the struggles, the humor, God's goodness, and a little side of crazy.
Hey, that's who we are.
This is Crazy Missionary Stories. Hello and welcome back to Crazy Missionary Stories. Today we are interviewing Catalina and Jim Tate, who have been serving on the mission field for 29 years. So Catalina, will you start out by telling us what you're currently doing on the mission field?
Good morning, everyone. Yes. So we are actually doing discipleship ministry to pastors and leaders around the world with theology and in the sacredness of human life. So how is life attacked in your nation? And what is the heart of God towards the nation and towards the church to respond to those attacks?
Jim, explain a little bit. So you're retired, right? So will you explain that a little bit to us?
Okay. Well, I spent 25 years on the mission field, and as the Lord would have it, our mission in Ecuador closed down. We were the last two missionaries on the field. And so we came back here to the States because God just showed us without a doubt that He wanted us back here for some reason. So we came back, and again, by His hand, I got a job teaching Spanish, first in Mobile County, then in Baldwin County in Alabama. And so, and I stayed in teaching for 10 more years. So I recently retired, but I've always been supportive of Kati's ministry. She is, in Ecuador and here. But now I can go along with her and help her out even more. So that's what I've been doing right now, getting ready to do that.
And he has been in some of our trips, but now he has a little more freedom to go along.
And you travel all over the world doing this?
Yes, we do. So
How many countries you've been in?
So I've been in around 24 countries.
Wow.
Yes.
That's amazing. That is so cool. How did you guys feel the call to missions?
All right, I'll start.
Okay.
I came to Jesus, I wouldn't say in midlife, but it was later on in my life story. From the first moment when I realized that Jesus had called me to Him, I saw how He had prepared me to go do missions, because I started learning Spanish when I was about 9 years old. And I've never not wanted to learn Spanish. And so all through college, and then I went to the Peace Corps I'm not as, well, this is back in 1970, so before many of you were born. But anyway, and I went to Colombia, and that's where I learned to really speak Spanish. And then master's degree in Latin American studies, that's my focus. And then I started teaching high school first in Montgomery County in Alabama. And then God called me to missions because in my church I took some mission trips to Belize and then to Quito, and it was on the one to Quito that as I got off the airplane, this is before jetways, and you got off and you got on the tarmac and you walked to the building. But in Quito is in a valley, and on all around you were mountains. And so you just look up, and I heard a little voice saying, "You're home." And during the 2 weeks that I was there, 3 different missionaries approached me about giving up my job of teaching and coming back to Ecuador and as a full-time missionary. needless to say, my experience in public education from that moment on became sort of hard. So I remember talking to my pastor and telling him about it, and he said, "Well, I think God's moving you." And so at the end of those 2 weeks in Ecuador, I said, "Yep, I'm coming back." And from that moment on, it was a like a ski slope. I've never skied before, but I can imagine. Well, no, because I've never skied before. All right, remember that? I've never skied, but it was just fast. First of all, I got back and went to one of the elders in my church and told him that I think God had called me to the mission field. He looked at me. He says, "Well, we've been praying for that."
Oh, wow.
You had no idea.
I had no idea. And he said, at that time, he was the denominational chairman for the mission, and he called up the people who know on the mission board, and I was approved. Wow. And this was in August. I was approved in October. Started my support raising and teaching at the same time. And in September of the next year, I was on the field. Yeah.
Did you go through a training
Well,
to go before going to the field, or it was just one of those
Okay.
like, we're sending you, you're going, and that's it?
well, as when I recounted all of my experiences in international living, they said, "Oh, well, you don't need language training." No. I had taught for 12 years.
You were a Spanish teacher.
Yep.
You could correct my Spanish, I'm sure.
Let's do a test.
Let's
We'll grade you.
fail.
No, well, I won't. Let's not get into that. But also, having lived in Colombia for 2 years, and I had all the cross-cultural training. They said, "Oh, you don't need this. You don't need this." I usually say that, when I became a believer, I look back and I could see God moving me from starting me here, moved me here, got me out of some trouble, something that was not very healthy, and moved me on, and then, voila, there I am.
So do you mind telling us how you became a believer?
Oh, wow. It's God uses a lot of means to bring us to Himself, even I'll say defects in our character. He can use to, for His glory. Well, I hope. But while I was teaching, my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And my mother refused to say, put him in a nursing home. So I said, well, I would move back to my hometown, which was only 45 miles south of Montgomery, where I was teaching. So I'll move back and, help her out with my father. Well, after he died, my mother went to visit with my sister, to get her out of, because he was at home most of the time. And it was extremely hard for my mother. And so she just got out. So I was at home by myself, and she wanted me to, on his birthday, he died in December, and he would have been 85 in January. Well, it was a custom, let's say, as a memorial to put flowers in the church. And so my mother says, I hadn't been in church in a long time. My mother said, "I want you to go to church and see how the flowers look." Well, I didn't know that when you have the Lord's Supper or communion, they don't put flowers in the church, but they did on that day. There was the communion table set up. There were the flowers behind it. So anyway, got through with the ceremony, and the sermon, and the pastor, he read from 1 Corinthians 11, verse 27. He is who doesn't recognize the body of Christ. It's better not to take. Well, I got okay, but I grew up in that church, and my Sunday school teacher for many years was sitting right here beside me. Plate comes around, and I'm going, this is where my pride and vanity, I can't, what is she going to think if I let the plate pass? But I can't participate. I knew I wasn't a part of the body of Christ. And so at that moment, it was just a working of the Holy Spirit. I just said, I just confessed right there.
Wow.
And it was emotional, yep. And from that moment on, yeah.
Another story.
It's that snowball going down that ski slope.
That is, I don't think I've ever heard a salvation story like that.
haven't either.
That is really cool. Wow.
Well, and as I said, God uses many things to bring us to Him.
Yeah.
And
like you said, you were raised in the church, so you knew what you needed to do. You knew how to pray and just give your life to the Lord, ask Him to be.
well, yeah, and as I said in my testimony, I always say that as a child going to church, I learned the Westminster Shorter Catechism. I grew up as a Presbyterian, and I knew all of the questions and all the answers, but it never made any sense until Jesus was in my heart. When after that point, I was going, oh my gosh, that's what that means.
Wow. It became real.
And it became real.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That is really neat. So let's hear your story, Catalina. I know they kind of overlap a little bit. So tell us your journey in becoming a missionary and becoming a believer.
I actually became a believer. I'd say that it was through the work of mission. So I was going through a crisis of depression, and I studied in Brazil, my university. And so I had gone back to Ecuador, and I was living with my mother. And I was super depressed because I didn't want it to go back first, but also because life had been really hard, bad decisions. And so my sister said to me, well, there is a lady that does counseling in this church that I'll go. And so why don't you go and talk to her? And at this point, I was at the last part of my, hopeless. So I went and I just shared with her what was going on, and she presented the gospel. And so I was like, okay, well, if this prayer doesn't help, it's not going to hurt. That was my mindset, but I am so thankful that the Holy Spirit was in there. And when she led me in the prayer, I was intentionally saying the words. So just kind of agreeing with her and the wording and everything. And so that was how I came to Christ.
Wow.
And that was August of 90. And no. Sorry, it was not 90. It was 93. So then a few months after that, 6 months after that, I met Jim because he was working with that missions team that was planting the church. And there were different church plants. So he was not always there, but he was always in classes. And so it was funny because this lady and the pastor will invite me for discipleship programs and things, but like, you know, really intense classes, which I think I wasn't yet ready. I was like, I'm not understanding. I was a new believer. But it was because they wanted to kind of
Introduce you.
introduce it to
They
him.
were playing good.
Yes, yes. And so eventually, we were actually introduced by Cuban missionary lady that was leaving the country, and they were having their goodbye party. And so that is when they actually introduced us. And that was 94. And so that was the Soccer World Cup. And Brazil and Italy were playing. And Brazil won, and I was a fan of Brazil. I still am. And so he sent me some bouquet of roses with the flag of Brazil.
Yeah, well, they were yellow roses on a green-black background with a blue
bow.
bow.
Yes.
So it was gorgeous. It was really gorgeous.
That's good.
And so I kind of felt like, oh, I have to call him and say thank you for the flowers. And so I called, and then he invited me over for dinner, and that was the kind of the beginning of going out and dating. And so we got married at the end of 94, so it was kind of fast. I guess everything is in a slope for him.
That ski slope, man.
That ski slope.
And then the missions field was included as a combo with the marriage. And so I was, oh, yeah, well, I think that I can help people through. I am a nutritionist by education. And so I think I can help people through that and just present the gospel and blah, blah, blah. So, but after we got married, we had to come to the U.S. for me to be approved by the mission board and also to raise more funding. And so during that time, we were here for about 22 months. And during that time, I learned of the work of pregnancy centers. I have never heard before about it, but when I learned, I was like, oh, this is something that we really need in Ecuador. And so I went, and my intention was to get the training and everything. But so when I went there, the director was super sweet, and I shared with her my story, and I had had an abortion earlier in my life, and so I had confessed that to the Lord, but I have not been healed. And so when I talked to her, she says, well, let's go first through your own healing first before you can minister to others.
So this was a crisis pregnancy center that you were talking to her, and she was walking with you then through your process of healing from abortion in the past.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So when I learned about the pregnancy centers, there was one in Montgomery, and I went to talk to them for me to be trained to develop that ministry in Ecuador. And so that is when she invited me to go through my own healing.
So she really just stopped everything and said, hey, let's first focus on you being whole.
Right. Yes, we can actually not give from what we don't have. And so that was my first kind of approaching my own healing, and from the trauma of abortion. And so, and then I did the training with them. And so that is when I actually felt my call to missions. That was my missions field. So it had to go through that process, and then the Lord really spoke to me about that.
Can I interject something? Kathy said you can't give from something you don't have. Yeah. And I think that is so profound, because in the church of today, that a lot of people are wounded, and we ask them to give, but we don't realize they don't have the healing. They haven't been healed from trauma in their past. They've been forgiven, or they have forgiven, but they haven't received healing, an interior healing.
And so really that's the work that you guys are doing. Is that right? And the ministry that you have is you're bringing what the Lord has done in you, and you're saying we need this healing in the church today to move forward.
Yes. So after that, so we went back to Ecuador, and we went to Ecuador in '96, and from '96 to 2002, it was a lot of work for me because I had clarity that that is what the Lord wanted me to do. Jim was doing church planting, and I was doing the pregnancy center. I was also supporting the team in Ecuador with admin work and a lot of, because I am from Ecuador, I could help all of my other missionary people with things, and so I was the admin for the team. But during that time, I also translated materials from the English to Spanish, so that kind of in preparation for this pregnancy center in Ecuador. So in 2002, we opened the first pregnancy center in the country of Ecuador. It's called the Showers of Grace Foundation, and that was my baby. It is my baby.
Is it still running today?
Still running,
And
yes.
that's not in Quito?
In Guayaquil.
It's in Guayaquil.
Mm-hmm. In Guayaquil is the largest city in Ecuador and the main port, and that is where we were living when we were doing our work in missions. And so began the center, and the Lord really did a lot of miraculous things, a lot of wow stories, really. But so this is in the center, we actually provided 3 basic services. It was prevention, like talking with the youth about the value of purity, having goals in life, and how do you establish those goals will also help you to be successful and avoid unplanned pregnancies, and not only that, but also sexual transmitted diseases, etc. And so the other part was intervention. So when the girl came pregnant and she was seeking an abortion, so how we helped them to make a decision for life. And then the third one was the abortion recovery. So after a few years just working in the ministry, I kind of sense a little voice that says, I'm going to send you to the nations. And I was like, no. I probably didn't hear correctly, because I was like, I don't know anyone other outside of Ecuador. Well, some people in Brazil, but not really something that will take me to the nations. And then I don't have the resources either. By now, the pregnancy center was affiliated with an organization here that's called Life International, and we had seek that affiliation because I wanted a ministry that will support our work, that will train us, that will equip us to do a good work. And so going back, opened the center in 2002. In 2005, got the affiliation, and they began to train us. And in 2009, they invited me to go to the first international trip. Wow. By now, they are also not only focusing on pregnancy centers itself, but on the church, because it's actually the church that has to own this. Yeah. You have to own what is going in the community. It is a call for the church to respond to these needs. Mm-hmm. The government is not going to respond. The schools are not going to respond. Mm-hmm. It is the church, the one that has to carry the torch. Mm-hmm. And so it was a shift. And so we began to train pastors and leaders in the church, leaders in Christian ministry, leaders in the communities. And so with this theology of the sanctity of human life, and why does the church is responsible for responding against these attacks against life in the nations. Wow. And so it's not only abortion. Mm-hmm. Abortion is the tip of the spear. It actually breaks that sacredness of life, mm-hmm. and in the most vulnerable form. Mm-hmm. But there are other attacks against life, abuse, trafficking, divorce.
Well, there are a lot of other things. Did you say elder abuse? Anything that is going to that is the atrocities of humankind against humankind. Yeah. All of that, and it is vital, I think, that the church step up Now, in my own experience, it just hasn't happened because is the church doing what it should do, preparing parents, grandparents, all the members of the church in the sacredness of human life, and it goes even further than just abortion, as Kathy's mentioned. I mean, that's sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, all of the types of abuses that you possibly can think of can be we can be addressed, and parents need to know this. And who better to talk about the sanctity of human life than the church?
And not only that, but also, for instance, biblical sexuality, because sex is a gift that God gave it to us. And but the church is not teaching biblical sexuality. I have been, as I said, in 24 countries, and pretty much everybody says the same thing. You know, the church is not carrying the torch on that. It has become silent. And so where do youth learns about sex? With the peers, with the culture, with experience. And so those are not good things. And parents, I mean, just working with parents, sometimes they say, but we don't know how to talk to them. So who should teach the parents? The church.
So you're giving tools to the church
Yes.
for all of these things.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And so we don't work with larger groups, with 100 of people. We don't do that because we really want for them to actually learn by doing it. So we do small groups, but we really want to affirm what they learn. And it's both. It's a knowledge, but also it's a changing of the heart.
Yeah.
And so it takes time. It takes constant working with them. So when we go on a trip, we don't do just, it's an event and we leave. It's actually a partnership that lasts. As long as we are here, we will continue to pray for them and work with them if they need it. And so it is transforming, but little by little.
Have you seen communities change? Have you seen churches take the torch then, grab a hold and say, yes, we're going to work in our community, and seen things kind of come to fruition because of this training and what you guys are doing, the healing that the Lord is bringing, and a new vision?
We have seen some changes, but it's not an immediate change. It actually takes years. And so we've seen some changes in some countries, like in Africa, there is a group of leaders that are actually in a coalition now of leaders. Then they work with different countries within Africa, and they go and train to other countries in Africa. And so, because also this work is between life and death. And so it needs a lot of prayer as a foundation. And so they have developed this coalition that has a foundational in prayer, and they have a team that prays, and then they have those that teach, and then they have those that continue just kind of pouring on the new leaders. And so it's been a process, it's been a long journey, but it is, and I don't think we will always see all the effects, just being so far away, but indeed it is. I mean, it's happening.
And you guys, just to clarify, you do this in Spanish and English, both, correct?
We do, yes.
And if it's in Africa, obviously they translate into African languages, and so
Yes.
you can go anywhere with this ministry. Is that right?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
Do you do this here in the United States as well?
No, we have not done it here in the U.S., but we're open to do it because the need is great. It is great. And one of the, as I was sharing a little while ago, one of the characteristics of the training is that it's a hands-on training. It's based on the principle that adults like to learn by doing. And so we actually have a lot of activities, very, very active, very dynamic. And we also learn because like when we go to a country, for instance, India or Cambodia, we don't know everything about the culture. And so we need to listen to them to learn about their culture, how they think, how they process pain, how they process decisions, who are the leaders in the families or in the communities, And so we learn from them. And so in this dialogue, methodology helps us to learn about them, and they learn also from us. So it's beautiful.
And the methodology is really unique. It's not one person standing in front of a group and lecturing. As a high school teacher, I know that lecturing does not really work all the time. Involving in it conversations, using open-ended questions, not questions that are going to end in yes or no. No, something you have to add to it. And I found that that gets down to really the meat of the subject. I mean, that's where it is when they start thinking about and how they would apply this. It's unique. It's unique.
And actually, I think that the methodology also brings about dignity. Most of the cultures that we work with are honor-shame cultures. And so because they feel ashamed of who they are and all of that, they feel that they cannot do it. But when you actually work with them and equip them and they are able to do it, it builds them up. And so it does, it's hidden in within. We don't say that to them, but we see the results, and they see the results in them. And so little successes invite another success and another success, and then they feel able to do it. And so the way we work also guarantees the multiplication of ministry, because after a while they feel equipped to do the same. And we keep working with them so that they will reproduce it. And so then they are able to do it with others, and those with others, and so it multiplies ministry.
How long is the course that you teach?
We have 3 different curriculums. And so the first one is called The Journey of the Life Giver. And that is better to be done in 4 full days. So about 30 hours, 32 hours. Okay. But it is hard sometimes to have leaders for that amount of time. Although we have seen miracles as well, because when they come, they like it, and so they stay for the whole thing. But so we can squeeze it a little bit in 3 days. Okay. And the other the other 2 curriculums are more like 24 hours, so we can do it in 3 days. And we always say, if we have time for practice, then that makes better. So, but we'll work with the leaders and just schedule it. So we are flexible.
So what are some of the hands-on practice? What does that involve in one of these training courses?
For instance, we will do discussion groups. So I will say, okay, we're going to put a group of women here and a group of men here. You're going to write a story about a boy that is being abused in the context of the football team. Someone is abusing this boy. How that affects the boy. How is the people responding to that? Wow. Who he was. So tell about his circumstances. So how is his family life? Who's he going to tell? Or who's he's not going to tell. So they began to talk about those things. So how the community responds, how the boy responds, how that affects him. And so they are able to tell us, that. And they are able also to think what happens in those cases.
It really makes you think about what's going on and aware of what could be happening even around you right now.
Which can lead to some formulations of how to address this problem, which is really important.
Yes.
That's so important. I know a lot of times here in America, we hear about, churches covering stuff up because they don't want to ruin the church's name. So that's such a huge thing you guys are doing, to have a plan in place, to know how you're going to respond if something does happen.
Yeah, and one of the things that is characteristic of this, because it's a difficult topic and it's a sensitive topic, we really handle a lot of confidentiality. So for instance, in abortion recovery, we normally open the group, let's say, with 10 participants. Once we open, no one else is allowed to come in. So if someone didn't come from the beginning, nobody's going to enter in the middle of it. Because we actually make a commitment of confidentiality as facilitators to them, but also the participants make a commitment of confidentiality to each other.
Yeah.
So my story, I'm allowed to talk about my story. Nobody else is to tell my story,
Right.
unless I have, unless
Given
I give
permission.
permission,
Yeah.
right? And so that actually creates a safe place, because then they can open up. If not, they are going to say no. Tomorrow the whole church will know. Tomorrow the whole town will know. And so we begin with that abortion recovery. That is one of the first sessions that we do. So just to guarantee them that we are for them, committed to their safety, committed to their healing. And they commit to each other also, because that develops a Christian community that is safe to live with.
Catalina, I feel like I heard you say at one point in time a statistic on how many women are post-abortive.
So there was a statistic many years ago that here in the United States, 1 in every 3 women in a pew in a church are 1 of 3 are post-abortive.
So that's a tremendous need for healing and restoration on a topic that a lot of people just don't talk about.
It is the scarlet sin, so you don't want to say it because of the comments that can come across. But at the same time, Jim sort of touched a little bit on that. Like so many times we have people in the churches, and I have to say this, men and women are hurt by abortion. It's not a women's issue.
Right.
It is both. So, and we see how men are hurt, and the thing is that so many people come to Christ and they are forgiven and they confess their sin to the Lord and they are forgiven. But then they sit in the chair like handicapped. The enemy has shut their mouths because they feel that because of the shame of their past decision, they cannot speak about truth now. Even in that topic or any other topic, because shame and guilt will silence their voices, and that is the need of healing.
There is a small book that was published. It's called Fatherhood Aborted. It deals with post-abortion syndrome in men. I read that and I was going, so that is why we can't, and as a church planter, we had problems recruiting leaders in the church.
Men leadership.
Because no one felt that they were worthy. That's my supposition. Because probably 1 in every 3 in Latin America, 1 in every 3 men have been involved in an abortion in Latin America. So they were handicapped from the get-go, and that was something. But stepping up to be leaders is something post-abortive men hesitate to do. One of the symptoms is a man who is withdrawn and he wasn't able to protect that child,
that woman,
and the woman.
Essentially, what you're saying, because I'm just thinking about where the church is today and hearing and seeing it is so hard to find leaders probably around the world in the church, and you're saying that this itself is one of the reasons why it's hard to find people to step up and say, I will help you, because they just don't feel that they can do it because of the wounds of the past, because of the decisions they made in the past. They've handed over that sense of, or they've given up the sense of, I can do this, I can take authority.
So,
and
Christy,
lead.
I want to put a foundation from the scriptures on that. So, the first thing that God called us was to be fruitful and multiply. That is in our core, okay? And the core is the center of who we are. And so, when we go through abortion, when we go against that calling, all of our core is messed up. All our identity is transformed. Because we know that we did wrong and there is no way back. The decision has been taken and there's no way back. And so that is why so many people feel like I don't have the capacity to lead or to lead my family, to lead my country, to lead the community, to lead in church, because I actually already throw that out of the way when I made that decision. So that is why the need of healing on that, because it has to restore your identity, you know.
So we have already talked about the fact that just asking forgiveness has been given, it's granted, it even received, but you're saying to take back your identity, you've got to go through the healing process.
And back the territory that the enemy stole. I mean, at some point that we agree with the culture of death. And so we have to say, you know, I renounce that culture of death. And I take back the territory that I gave to the enemy, because it's not to be yours, it's the Lord's. And so that process has to be intentional.
Yeah.
And it happens, it's beautiful to see just the transformation that happens, but you have to be really intentional about doing it.
And so when you do this course, you're like 3-4 days intensive. This is what you're doing. It's not like you're here for a couple hours and then you go home. You're really focusing on this material and walking through this together.
Yes.
And then I imagine it just takes months and years to live it all out.
Right. I normally say, like, it is one session builds in the next one. So after we have actually settled like a safe environment, then we go into the part of actually forgiveness. And so many of them says, oh, I already confessed. It's okay, we're going to do it again. Because we actually focus on 3 aspects of forgiveness. So we first of all take, who do I need to ask for forgiveness on this? Who are the people that I need to ask for forgiveness? What do I am holding against myself? Do I judge myself? Do I punish myself? And the third one is, I am going to forgive those that hurt me. And so we do the 3 parts of it. And then we, you know, based on Colossians, we take all of that certificate of death to the cross. And so that is beautiful too, because it's the cancellation. The cancellation has been in total, in full. Now, there is nothing that you have confessed that the Lord has not forgiven in full.
And that's a point that I think a lot of people in the church today, they say, okay, I've been forgiven, but you haven't appropriated that forgiveness. You haven't made it personal. You've not said, okay, I've been forgiven. Christ paid for my sin. I am no longer under condemnation. And that appropriating that mindset that I am already forgiven. It's been cleaned as far as the east is from the west. But we can't imagine that.
It's hard.
So after we've done the forgiveness, actually, then with a clean heart, we can enter into this, I'm going to take back what is mine, you know. And so then you enter into this, what we call it, breaking strongholds and soul ties. And so you just go into that soil and says, okay, it's, you know, but you have to enter with a clean heart. It's not to take it lightly. So that is what is super intense, but is beautiful. It's cool. It's transformational.
If someone would like say a pastor is listening to this right now and says, hey, I would really like to contact these guys and have them come do this course in my church, in my community, how can we do that? How can we facilitate that? You guys have a website? You're Globe Missionaries.
Yes.
So I know coming to Globe's website would work, but how can they get in contact with you other than that?
I think we can always offer our emails. So my email is catalina.tate.63@gmail.com.
I'll put it in the show notes for everybody to see that, so it'll be easy to find.
Yes, I'll be glad, I'll be honored. I think there is a lot of need, not outside the United States, but it's all over the world.
What about if there's a woman or a man out there listening to this who just personally needs support? Maybe they're post-abortive, maybe, you know, they're dealing with one of these attacks of life. Could they reach out to you as well?
I believe so. Yeah, they can reach out. We can always talk about it. We like to do the abortion recovery in a setting of a group because
A small group.
yes, it's maybe 5, 6 people in a small group because it helps to build this community that we are not alone on this. And so that is also one element of the healing process. This is not just my secret, it's the secret of the community. And so we need to kind of promote that growth.
And a beauty of the small group is that ideas and emotions can be bounced off of each other. Someone might say, I struggle with this. Another one says, I do too. So you're creating a lot of empathy and union.
So you validate the stories actually of each other, but do not stay on the wrong part of it, but actually on the restoration through Jesus Christ. So they work together.
So what would you say to encourage someone or give advice? Maybe someone's out there who wants to be an advocate for pro-life. Here in America, I know it's probably like this in other parts of the world, it's scary to speak out against abortion because of the political side of things. It's become a very big political issue here, which is crazy. And you know, we have cancel culture. People can be attacked speaking out against this. What could you say to someone who might be, you know, feeling that call to speak out? What could you say to encourage them to just go for it?
I would say the first thing is to really, really understand that that is the heart of God. He created us in His image. He loves us so much, and He wants us to be defenders of those that don't have a voice. And so if you own that, begin praying. You know, prayer is the soil of this ministry. You cannot do anything if you don't pray because the enemy is going to attack fiercely. And so maybe just get together with a few friends, even if there are 3 or 4 friends or couples if you are in that age group, and just begin to pray about these things. So how can we respond about this? And so began praying about it. And then there are organizations in every city almost that minister in this area, or maybe talking with your pastor about how can we respond to these needs in our church, you know, and get trained, you know, get equipped to speak with love. So instead of attacking those that promote abortion, say, so how do we speak truth in love?
That's good. Yeah, that's really good.
I'm curious to know, so you're missionaries with Globe then. How did all of that come about? This is a little bit turning the topic just a little bit, but how did you guys become a part of Globe International?
So when we came back from Ecuador, Jim went back to work in the school system, and I was like, oh, I want to continue the ministry because that is my calling. That is what I want to do. And Danny Armstrong had come to our church in Fairhope to do the perspectives class. And so we took that class, and I guess it was sort of the longing of being in the mission field. I think I can say that. And so I wanted to still talk missions. And the perspective class was awesome. I was like, we both were like, why we didn't take this class before we went? Not now, when after 20 years, 25 years in the field. but it was a lot of good teaching and good learning. And so, and through the relationship with Danny, then he told us about Globe, and I was like, well, I really want to join an agency so that I can continue to do my work. So that is how I came to Globe in 2015.
That's cool.
Yeah, I didn't
Just
know that.
yeah, just a side note, Danny Armstrong is who you mentioned. We actually had him and Judy on the podcast, episode 2, I think. So go back and listen if you haven't. And perspectives, I know you said you wish you would have taken that course before going. So that's an encouragement to other people who take that course if you're
Absolutely.
interested in missions. We've heard a lot of people get a lot of great knowledge from that.
Absolutely. It was like a wake-up call. Even before we were already awake, you're even
Eye-opening,
you're
really.
wow. I wish we had, as I said, I wish we had done this. I am not yet a member of Globe, but I'm in the process of applying.
Oh, wow.
So pray for me on that.
Yeah, I mean,
You got it, you got it.
So let me just say this. I mean, you're happy enough with Globe that now you, as a retiring teacher, you want to join Globe because you want to be more involved with missions as well.
I want to be happy too.
You want to be
Join Globe, you'll
Well,
be happy.
You want to go down a ski slope, so
It is will help that both of us are in the same agency.
Yeah.
As far as
Especially since we are traveling together, and so it's good that he comes to be a part of it. And I think donors and churches that support me understand that he was working and I was doing the ministry, and so this transition is coming along.
I find it interesting that you look to Globe. I guess that was because you've met Danny and learned kind of a little bit about Globe at that point in time.
Right, that is correct. So, and I like that it was close in distance to come and everything, and I guess I was ready to say, let's get going, you know. So
Well, we love having you guys here. I've loved getting to know you over the years.
when you have all of the Globe missionaries and you have all these things, and I'm included, I feel jealous.
What makes you feel jealous, Jim?
I'm not a part.
Really? Even though you really, I mean, you are because you're there with us, but, but you're not a member.
It's not,
It's not the same.
and everybody's just as sweet and congenial and receiving and treating me very nicely. But you know,
You want to be
Yeah.
a member.
I do too.
I love it. I think
Yeah.
that's great.
Oh, yeah.
And, we're excited.
Love
When
to
I
have
heard-
you.
I heard you talking to somebody the other week, I think just last week, about it a little bit, and that really stirred my spirit. Like, I'm really glad Jim's doing that.
Yeah.
It's going to be neat to have you.
Well, we're starting to wrap up on our time here. So I'd like to ask you our signature question, and I know today's topic is a little bit more serious, a little bit more heavy, but we'd love to hear a crazy story of your time in ministry over the years, whatever might come to mind.
I think that one of the craziest stories is just to see how God responds to the needs of ministry, His provision, His affirmation on the ministry. And so I'm going to tell Jim to tell the story about the time that when we were going to come back with our agency for home ministry.
Wait, hold on. You can cut this out too. You need tell the Genesis story. You have to tell the Genesis story.
he gets
It's gonna get you.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear it.
All right, let's do it. Genesis.
So one of the things that is interesting to see is how God brings little hints and even big hints sometimes to say, I am on this. So I had opened the pregnancy center, and we had this client that came, and she was seeking for an abortion, and through the work and everything, she decided to have the baby. And when the baby was born, her name was Genesis. Nothing that we have said to her, nothing that we have, given a hint or anything. It was her decision, but for me it was so meaningful. It was our first baby in the pregnancy center, the first one that was saved through the work of the pregnancy center. And it was like, that's new beginnings, and I know it was a new beginning for her mom and for the baby, but also
Because she received Jesus during that time.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was new.
Yeah.
The new beginnings from the mother to the baby. Wow.
Ministry.
And through the ministry, the first
pregnancy center in Ecuador.
yes,
That's
so,
incredible.
so it was very sweet, very sweet. Yes.
That's amazing.
And okay, I'll tell my story.
Okay.
When you get a group of missionaries we are all sinners, right? There's bound to be some sort of conflicts, personalities, way to do one thing, way to do another. Missionaries
Patience.
missionaries are human. So we're at a point in our that we were not quite sure that we wanted to stay with our mission board because of a lot of conflict. And we knew God wanted us on the mission field, but we were just not happy. Well, we went through the process with another agency, and they have Globe might think they have a difficult admission, but this one was
Wow.
yeah. So anyway, I started the work on that, and we were moving on down that slope again, and I also met with our team leader, and he told me, he said, well, you're getting ready to go back home on home ministry assignment, and so in order to come back, you're going to have to raise $16,000 in one-time gifts and increase your monthly giving by $2,000. I'm not one of these missionaries who likes to raise support. I do that because in order to get to the field and do the work, I have to do this. So yeah, okay, it's part of the job. So I said, the applications process was going on. This comes up, and I'm going, oh. And I just told the Lord, if you want us to stay in this mission board, with this mission board, and to stay here in Ecuador, you are going to have to raise the money. I don't think I'm physically able to do that. And I have to say that I didn't really want to do that. That's confession. Good for the soul.
We won't tell anyone.
Okay.
Between us right here.
All right.
And you guys, don't tell anyone either.
That's right. That's right. So this was probably in October, and then we were just sloshing along, and come December, and we're getting ready to come back to the States, and around Christmas, I was checking my donation report and going down, saying, oh, okay. Well, I got to one donor, and there was a figure, 5 figures, $33,000 from one person. And I'm going, this cannot be correct. In the office, they just added an extra 0 on the end of that. It was a mistake. So I called up the agency, and I said, are you can you pull up my donor report and you've got to check something else for me. The person I was talking to, okay, no problem. And then I heard, oh. And I said, yeah.
Yeah.
Is this correct? Well, I don't know, but I'll sure check it out. Okay. We were still in December. On the 24th of December, I get a call from the mission agency, and they said, yep, it's correct. Everything we needed.
Crazy.
That's a crazy story.
Yeah.
That's a God story.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you mentioned before what had happened with the donor. Why?
Oh, yeah, well, this donor lives in Texas, and he has about 20 acres of land where he raises zebu cows. And they found oil under his property.
Wow.
And so that was a tithe from his first check.
That's cool.
Being a blessing because he was blessed.
Yeah.
It was an amazing thing because it really showed not only God's provision, but He answering to our prayers, clearing out the land, because of course that stopped the application with the other organization, and also confirmed that we were to stay where we were.
Yeah.
And I guess it spoke not only to us, but also to the missionaries and to the agency. It was amazing.
Our superiors were going, wow.
Right. So it was really nice.
Well, thank you guys so much for sharing your story. That is a crazy story. Love to hear it. Thanks for being here. It was so awesome to get to know you guys a little bit more.
It's a pleasure for us.
Thank you for being a part of that with us today, for testifying to the good things the Lord has done, the great things He's doing through your life and the ministry. It's just been an honor to hear that today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you guys so much for listening to Crazy Missionary Stories. If you are listening on Spotify, don't forget to follow us and give us a 5-star review. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe. And of course, share it with your friends. Thank you guys for listening. See you next time.